you. Lost my agenda already. Welcome to the meeting for Warrant and Finance for January 18th, 2022. The first thing on the agenda is to salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me. The next thing that we'll do is approve the minutes of our last meeting. As you can see, we didn't take any votes or anything last time, so they're pretty simple.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of the last meeting?
I'll second that.
All in favor? And it is unanimous. The next thing on our agenda is the planning board moratorium that they move forward, and I want to just make a short statement, and that is, this moratorium is brought forward from the planning board. Mr. Sivany is nice enough to give his support on the information that we might be asking tonight. But I want people to remember this is not brought forward by him. It's brought forward by the planning board. So with that being said, you guys want to read the moratorium out loud, or do you want to? What's your wishes?
Have you all read the revised? There was a revision since the planning board's last, not a true revision, but the interjection of a couple of words and phrases in that. So, have you read it? Yes.
Everybody read it?
Okay. Before we go on.
Yes, good.
In an effort to be straightforward, and I don't want any conflicts of interest here, I feel we need to ask two members to recuse themselves tonight. Joe Roma owns a small pit, therefore, whatever his feeling is, probably we could count on. And Bernie, you're on the planning board, and again, it could be construed as a conflict of interest. So I am...
Well,
so I am asking for voluntarily. If you would kindly recuse yourself from this portion. That doesn't mean you have to leave. It means you will not have a vote.
Right, you'll still be the discussion part.
Yep, you'll still be here for discussion.
Not to vote
But
on
not for the vote because of conflicts of interest. Joe, would you mind recusing yourself from the vote?
No, I wouldn't, but I'd like to
Be able to speak?
be able to speak.
Yes, absolutely. As a member of the board, you...
We went through this 30 years ago.
Okay.
Quite a lot of people
Yeah.
moved into town with her.
Okay, but you will be able to speak as a member of the board,
Yeah.
as you would be able to as well.
Are you all right with that, Manny?
I will do it. I struggle with it, to be honest, because I think if that's the perspective, then people shouldn't serve on both boards.
Yeah.
So I will, I'm not gonna belabor the point tonight, but I will make a decision. I will resign one of the boards, within the week, and I don't know which one yet.
Okay.
But I will not vote tonight.
Thank you.
But obviously, like, Joyce said, your opinion and thoughts, just as important,
Well, yeah.
you know what I mean?
I'll just say, I'm not so naive as to think that other people haven't come in tonight pretty much having made their decisions
Yeah.
based on things I've observed and heard directly from them. And I don't see how that's any different than my position being known. But we don't need to go there. Again, I've agreed to recuse myself and I will. And I will resign from one board or the other within days. So we don't have that conflict. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, I will turn it over to Chris, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Sure.
If those two individuals aren't allowed to vote, does the alternate step up to vote?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was gonna, say that when the time for the vote. Do you have a copy of the advice?
I have it.
Okay.
You want to just read the ordinance as written?
If that's what you wanna do, Chris, it's, you're doing the presentation.
Yeah, the moratorium, sorry.
Yeah.
The town of Acton Maine adopts a moratorium ordinance on mineral extractions as follows. Whereas the town of Acton is experiencing increased development in mineral and extraction pits in close proximity to each other and to water bodies, and whereas continued development of mineral extraction pits persistent to current zoning and land use ordinances could pose serious threats to health, safety, welfare of the residents of Acton, including but not limited to: 1, increased volume of large commercial vehicles on local roads with attendant concerns regarding pedestrian and vehicular safety, deterioration of roads, infrastructure, and increased maintenance expenses. 2, impact of additional and/or expanded mineral extraction pits in areas approximate to water bodies on water quality. 3, impact of additional and/or expanded mineral extraction pits on air and soil quality as a result of particulate pollution and erosion. 4, noise pollution. 5, loss of open space and wildlife habitat. Whereas the town's current zoning ordinance and land use ordinances lack uniform standards for mineral extraction pits sufficient to allow mitigation of threats to public health, safety, and welfare identified as above, and whereas the town will need at least 180 days to develop and implement the necessary amendments to its zoning and land use ordinances to mitigate these threats, and whereas in the judgment of the town, these facts create an emergency within the meaning of Title 30-A MRSA 4356-1B, requiring immediate moratorium on any new or expanded mineral extraction pits or expansion of any conditional use permits for the preservation of public health, safety, and welfare. Now therefore the town of Acton hereby enacts a moratorium effective immediately, applicable to the maximum extent permitted by law and subject to severability clause below, to proceedings, applications, and petitions not pending within the meaning of Title I MRSA 302 as of February 2nd, 2022. Seeking the permits for approval of any new mineral extraction pits or expansion of any existing mineral extraction conditional use permits. The moratorium established hereby shall continue for a period of 180 days from the date of enactment. No town official, agent, or employee shall accept or approve any applications, plans, permits, licenses, and/or fees relating to use of governed by this moratorium ordinance during the term of this moratorium ordinance or any extension hereof. To extent any provision of this moratorium ordinance is deemed invalid by the court of competent jurisdiction, the balance of moratorium ordinance shall remain valid.
Thank you, Chris. That's pretty self-explanatory. As far as I'm concerned, I know there was a little bit of change there at the meeting there the other night, but that was just very minor adjustment. So anybody that has the one from the other night, the words have changed just a little bit, not that it changes the meaning, there were just some clerical things that they wanted changed. With that being said, I'll open up, questions to the planning board. Chair, if anybody has any.
Great, I can go home. No questions.
Nice try.
Well, we might as well address mine then.
You gotta open your mouth.
Mine was, the other night, I asked for the data to back up the reasons, for this moratorium.
So the data comes with the moratorium, that's stuff that we can't provide you with right now because the research hasn't really been done, or with studies, we have to find more information about it. That's kind of what the moratorium process of that's what the moratorium is giving us. It's giving us time to find out, to see if that ordinances or zonings or whatever needs to be changed, conditions, or not conditions, but, you know, if we need to, obviously I know enforcement's an issue, but more or less zoning and safety, you know. One of the biggest things right now is that we had a bunch of, I'd say dormant pits in the area. We didn't have the truck traffic, the concerns of residents, whether seasonal or year-round residents. So there's been a huge concern with safety, with the amount of trucks in one particular part of town, being H Road, and the amount of traffic that's going on. It's not, and I'm not saying it's the truck driver's faults or the pit worker's fault by any means, but how do we make it so that safety isn't an issue? Because I don't know if you want to have a commercial vehicle coming at you and, you know, it's just, to answer your question, the questions that you had last night, a lot of those questions I couldn't answer, and I still can't answer because it's gonna take time to get that information. This moratorium got thrown at us, or we started to do it really quickly. Didn't have enough time to really do the research prior to the moratorium, but if I had the information, then I wouldn't need the moratorium.
Right.
You know? So putting the moratorium together before, so that we can get the information, to make sure that the town is making the right decisions on what or the planning board or whatnot. That's kind of why they want the moratorium, is for that safety net. It wasn't because they're trying to stop anybody from doing any business, because we know that mineral extraction is a huge part of this community. You know, we're not trying to stop it, we're trying to make it so that they can coexist without the amount of issues or complaints or things like that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to it than just safety and complaining, but
Thank you, Jay.
we need the time to figure it all out.
Anybody else have anything?
Well, I thought a couple of things, and just looking at your list of 5 things, you know, in relation to the increased volume of commercial vehicles on local roads, concerning pedestrian and vehicular safety, that is a sheriff thing. You know, if these trucks are not operating safely on the road, then why aren't we calling the sheriff and having the sheriff patrol? And even though we don't have a dedicated deputy at the moment, the sheriff is still responsible. Deterioration of road infrastructure and increased maintenance expenses, well, the pits do pay taxes. So that helps offset that. Impact of additional, number 2, on water bodies and water quality. I do believe that the pits are state regulated also. So the state has actually done a bit of our work for us. Impact on air and soil quality. No data for that.
That's like I just stated, a lot of the stuff I don't have for you. Now, back to the safety and the thing, so, what is the regulated size for a road that's supposed to be traveled both ways with commercial vehicles? Or is there any regulation to that? You're on the road committee, right?
Yeah, offhand, I don't know, I couldn't answer that question. So I'd have to do some research on that.
I was told, Jason, by the road commissioners, in order for the road to be striped, they was talking about, people were talking about striping the road.
Right, it has to be wider.
That the pavement has to be, you have to have 11-foot lanes.
Right.
So I assume then the pavement.
What do we have,
would
10?
have to be 20, yeah.
Is
That
that
was my
center
best
stripes?
knowledge, is that the road was undersized width-wise.
Yeah.
And that's why they don't stripe it. So, that's a safety concern, right? Am I right by saying that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the
road's not
road...
wide enough to have-
The road committee asked for fog stripes for the elderly who have trouble seeing at night, and that was not doable. So, I mean, we're not doing the safety thing for our elderly even. But the sheriff should be contacted. Noise pollution, we do have a good neighbor policy with decibel levels at the property line. And I know that when I was on the planning board, we did do a couple of pits, and those decibel levels are written into their conditional use permits. And actually, a lawnmower and a leaf blower will exceed our regulations under the good neighbor policy, so we've got a bigger problem other than the pits. Loss of open space and wildlife habitat, we stop the pits, and chances are these big huge tracts of land are going to be subdivided and there will be housing put in. So that will cause a bigger loss of open space and wildlife habitat. And the property owners have rights, and there has to be a balance between the property owner rights and the town rights. And I don't see where the emergency is in doing this. I just don't see it.
Thank you, Leslie. Somebody else want to comment?
Well, I'm going to say I'm not convinced of an emergency either. I noticed you gave us this, which I'm happy to see. This is called a Mineral Extraction Ordinance from Hancock, Maine. This is something that a planning board will do. It will go out into other communities, in the state, sometimes just the county, but they will see what other communities of like size and demographics are doing. It's a resource, so I'm glad to see that.
So they enacted a moratorium.
Well, that's fine.
To get to that conclusion. I'm just saying, and I'm gonna quickly read something off, if you don't mind. One of the, I'll let you do it. It was something provided from another planning board member that she'd like.
Well, you might have a little bit of trouble, I'd be happy to get up.
Would you like to?
Yeah, I can get up and just kind of go over it. I gave that to you so you could follow along.
This one, right?
Yeah. This one.
So I know that this is a contentious issue. I just want to go over a little bit of how this came about.
Pat, could you lower the mic so it picks up more, please?
Thanks, Bernie.
So one of the things, just to recap, one of the things that we talked about at the planning board meeting, where the pits were often left open without restoration, and the person responsible is absent. So you can see this all over town. These are not all of my ideas. Some of them are just my thoughts. Some of them are things that we went over in the planning board. Facebook is a really good place to get a pulse on what's going on. We got some feedback from the hearing that we had. The other thing are buffers and scenery alteration and separation distance may be inadequate. Today, some pits are managed by people who are invested in ag. What about the future? Let's see. The roads, the truck traffic, the speeding, road improvement, and the cost of maintenance. You know, I'm just reiterating what we just talked about. Lack of analysis of concentration of best practical location related to the residents. They're often going unnoticed and out of view. They're not policed unless someone complains. Now, there was a little bit of talk about, well, they're just violations that you're talking about. But what happens is that we don't sit down and talk about this until somebody comes forward and complains. There's a violation. The fines for violations don't seem to deter some people, and they're simply a cost of doing business. I think it's an inefficient use of the CEO's time, and we all know that it's kind of a revolving door. You have to know a little bit about the codes, so you probably have worked in the industry. And I think the resource options are inadequate or absent with the current zoning criteria. The procedure for dealing with non-compliance should be self-policing through specific ordinance mandates that matter to the permit holder because the consequences are automatic and irrefutable. And that's basically, I just wanted you to see where we were coming from. It wasn't to target anybody in specific. I think that, you know, there isn't a rule, for instance, that says you're going to lose your permit, 3 strikes and you're out. It matters. I'm not going to go through the other ones because it's pointless.
If she gets to speak to other people.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
I just need 2 minutes to check.
The first part of this is going to be questions from the Warrant and Finance to the planning board members. And when that gets done, the public will be able to get up and ask questions and make statements. And
We will ask you questions too.
what's that?
We'll ask them questions.
Yeah, very well.
Too.
Could be.
You know.
Do I understand correctly that the purpose of tonight's meeting would be for the committee to vote as to whether they recommend that the public approve this or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And if, I think it's in this information that Jen gave out, I believe that we make this recommendation hopefully tonight, and then at Wednesday's selectmen's meeting, the selectmen would sign the warrant so that she can get it posted. For the meeting on, I believe it's the 5th of February. But don't hold me to that.
Yeah. No, I just think it's important people understand what this is tonight, that it's not, we get to decide whether this goes forward or not.
No.
It's just make a recommendation.
That's all it is.
Exactly correct.
Yeah. For clarification. Okay.
That's all we ever do.
Yeah.
Yep.
And hopefully when we get done our work, along with the planning board, when they do theirs, that people have a better understanding of what they'll be voting on
Right.
when the time comes.
Thanks.
Back to what, some of the questions I had asked Chris or Jason, I don't care, about seeing this, and I'm very sincere about it. This is how we inform ourselves, by looking around us. My question is, Mrs. Pearson, is it? Yeah, Mrs. Pearson. I would kind of disagree with one of the things you said. If a particular pit, you know, pick X, Y, and Z, they follow their conditional use permits. They follow you start at 7 o'clock in the morning. Your pit is so big, and you have said, and it's one of your conditions, that you're going to have 6 trucks going out back and forth, 12 trips in a day, and that's exactly what you do. But you've got Pit W over here, who, you know, pays no attention has trucks idling and filling up at 5:30 in the morning. And, you know, all of a sudden, his conditional use says he's got 8 trips a day, trips coming back and forth, and he's got 12 or 15, you know, going all the time. That is enforcement. You can get a cease order, a cease work order, and you can stop them from doing that.
From what I've been told, the town of Acton has nothing in their ordinance that allows me to stop any conditional use permits. All we can do is fine them and make it expensive for them to operate. Cannot take their conditional uses away. And could be wrong, but that's what I was described, when I spoke to, land use attorney for the town of Acton, that's what he told me.
That was Joe.
Yes, so I have no authority to pull a conditional use permit. They can break them as much as they want. I cannot stop them from operating. I can fine them, and that's all I can do.
So this moratorium isn't gonna solve that problem anyway.
Yes, it is, if we change the ordinance.
You change the ordinance, but those conditional uses, are grandfathered in.
That's how the ordinance is written right now.
Right.
Doesn't have to be that way after the moratorium.
I would want a lot more information on that, and I understand what you're saying.
No, that's fine.
You know,
I'm just stating what I was told.
Right.
And I haven't had to, thank God, had to enforce anything like that, so, because that's not what I want to have to do. I don't want to be in the business of violations.
It's not a pleasant thing to have to do. I mean, you know, I was on the board, and it can be an unpleasant thing when someone has to do it.
It's become pretty unpleasant lately.
Yes. It can be unpleasant, that's for darn sure. But I do also wonder about the ordinances that are written in relationship to gravel pits. I mean, have those been thoroughly, you've gone through those and you've thoroughly looked at them? And it seems to me that in those, as they stand now, because one of the things is you talk about an increase in volume. Well, is there a queue with 5 or 6 more people wanting to come in and open bigger pits and with more volume and more of that? I mean, at this time?
So right now, it's an allowed use, so there is no restrictions on how many or where or anything like that. And I'm not saying that would be the outcome of the moratorium. We're just trying to work through it all. You know, so a resident stated the other night, and whether it's correct information or not, there's 3 pits within 1 square mile of Moose Pond or whatever it is. And when you have pits having, let's just say they're not trucking 6 trucks a day, okay? It's substantially higher than that. So when you have 3 pits, 4 pits, 5 pits, I mean, sky's the limit right now because there's nothing in the zoning saying that there should be so many allowed in one area, or the size of this, or how many trucks should be allowed. I mean, it's left to the planning board to make that decision, and the ordinance is pretty vague, and it's left vague, I think, on purpose, so that it allows the planning board to enforce those conditions. And I don't really know where to go with that one, because, yeah.
Shouldn't it be vague? Because, you have pits that are different sizes and different, one pit will just be for themselves. And they use the material just for their own work. Other pits sell their material. So I would think that it's important for it to be vague, to give the planning board the flexibility to tailor the conditional use to what the pit is actually going to be doing.
I think, and Chris might be able to answer this one better for me, because it's the planning board and I'm just here to support them. They're looking for some more structure so that they can rely on the ordinance more than vagueness. and they're looking for some more facts to find out. I think what I've gathered from the planning board, a lot of it is they're making sure that they're not, well, obviously safety, but also not ruining areas of Acton that can't be rebuilt, you can't take it back, you know? You go and take it away and you can't put it back. So they want to make sure that they're not doing harm to water quality, a few other things. Chris, you want to?
Yeah, you know, structure of the land, I mean, the problem is, every planning board, all three of you were on at one time, I mean, I think three together. In previous boards, they all started different pits at different times, I mean, if we have a uniform thing across the board, it's just easier on him, it's easier on the town. And you know, like he stated, once that environment's gone, we're not gonna get that back.
Well, I think we all know intrinsically, once the aggregate is gone, it's not a renewable source. It's gone, period. That's when the revegetation comes back, and you, please excuse me, I don't remember which one of you talked about it, or if it was read from here, that and I agree 100%. In fact, if you all go into Ted's and you look at the picture on the wall of Acton, I have pictures of the lakes, and you look at Square Pond, you see a lot of scars in Acton. Well, I don't know if it's changed, I don't believe it has, but, and I know there are some people sitting in here tonight that will tell you that we could be pretty darn, you know, whatever with them. You want to open a pit so big, okay, you're doing everything right, it's your land, but by the way, write a check for $5,000, because if you don't revegetate, the town's going to do it, and we're going to do it with your money. And we have money in escrow, and I don't know if we have, maybe Mr. Winchell could tell me, I don't know if we have bonds too, but I know when I was on the planning board, we just had escrow accounts. Do we have bonds as well for that?
We don't do bonds.
I didn't think so, but I wasn't sure.
We talked to the lawyer, our land use lawyer said that the bonds weren't the way to go, because the problem is with a bond is, say someone puts up a $100,000 bond, because we're having the same issue with our
The solar.
solar panels, there we go.
Yeah.
There was a $94,000 deposit on that.
Right.
For the reclamation there. So they wanted to do a bond, but the problem is they could cancel the bond next year.
No.
And, which, I don't know if I can, like, one thing that I helped Jason here and Chris, one thing that they were talking to me about was, they were worried about the time of start, which is an issue, because if you get everybody on the same page, the enforcement part makes it a lot easier, because we got our sheriff, our deputy, or whatever you want to call him, and we voted that sheriff in to be able to enforce our ordinances. But you can't enforce something that is so, it would take a guy, you know, a long period of time trying to figure out who's supposed to be doing what, when you have one thing. The bond issue, as you come up with that, that's something that myself, I do look at it like, there's gotta be some regulating on that. I do find that there should be more consistency. You know, I have been to a planning board meeting where one person was charged it and another person wasn't. The amounts of different rates of money, I mean, that's what we should be talking about tonight anyways, money. This is finance, this is what we should be talking about. And where it impacts financially the town of Acton, but I've seen $94,000 go to one project and $6,000 for another. You know, there's a big gap there. And whether or not we charge it at all, or we have to have some consistency, one or the other. So I don't see a lot of that.
Yeah.
But you don't need a moratorium to make those changes.
No, and you're correct. You know, and you know, right now, as the chair, I'm not speaking for the other two, but when this was brought forward to me and the other two, we felt that if the planning board felt this was something that they really wanted to do, that we felt obligated to put it through. Whether or not we agree with it, because we still have to
Right.
make our recommendations on it, okay? You know, I haul gravel out of the pit every day. Well, I don't, my guys do, okay? And so, you know, it's tough for me because I see both sides of it. But I also, being in the seat that I'm sitting in, when I hear 5 or 6 complaints in a week of somebody doing something they shouldn't be doing, and then that's where it really becomes a real issue on our side. It's like, you know, I see it, it's more of a traffic issue. You know, we call our sheriff, the DOT shows up, which we don't want to see in town. But they can't sit on these roads and just babysit. So, but at the same time, we can't go chasing them down because we don't have the powers to do that. That's law enforcement. But at the same time, I'm still up in the air what I want to do, how I'm going to go with this. But at the same, I got until tomorrow night to figure this out. But there is some points where there's got to be some consistency where I think the moratorium would help, but at the same time, you may be able to just do it, you know, the planning board should be able to get down to business and start figuring out these issues and get it on the June ballot. So, so like I said, I'm up in the air on it, but there's got to be some consistency. I don't want to see, I was very, not upset, you know, but to see some people having to pay this, some people paying that, some people paying that. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I actually can remember some of the things you were referring to. And again,
I was there, that was the first planning board meeting, and I honestly
I remember.
did not want to be there, because I just couldn't take it.
Well, right, and you actually said to me I couldn't do what you're doing. But it goes back to what Leslie said, if you're planning, if your pit is this big, it's going to take X amount of dollars and experience, and at that point, we had a 20-year CEO. His experience and whatever would tell you, okay, to revegetate this is going to take X amount of dollars. If you've got a 500-acre pit,
But-
it's going to cost more.
But in reality,
So it's always
the job
different.
of the planning board, nobody's going to open up a 500-acre pit in town.
Well,
they're not allowed to.
Well, no.
no, they're not allowed to, number one, but I mean...
500 acres, it
But
could be
you-
all gravel, it could all be mined at one
But
point.
my point is...
The state won't let you do that.
Right, but my point is, they're not all the same.
No, and you're right.
You know, they're not all the same, and, I mean, there are some pits where they talked about doing road construction work and putting in safety lights, which mitigated some of the money that we would ask, you know.
I think that was where a lot of my frustration came with that meeting, because I don't feel that a property owner that owns a piece of property up on the H Road, or even on Sanborn Road, we had a couple of them down there. We got a couple on Milton Mills Road, that nobody really, you know, thinks about.
The Hopper Road, too.
Oh, Hopper Road, yep, there's a, you know, yep, they're all over the place. Because Acton's got a lot of good gravel, but, you know, the issue is, are we gonna turn around and say, okay, I'm gonna use Mr. Plant, because you were the one that, you guys wanna have stripe this and do this and refix the intersection and this and that, where a property owner's got a piece of property, he's gonna have to go do that, but I can go do 10 houses down that road and run those roads just as much as him, but I'm not paying for that. And I do it all the time, you know? I mean, we get on job sites where, you know, we'll haul 1,000 yards in a week, and what's the difference to him? No difference. Why should he incur the cost on him where everybody else is using it? So so what we have to do here is we have to look at it where it's reasonable and where it has to be fair for everybody.
That's why the conversations take place.
Yep, and that's why I like to see some consistency. I myself don't want to see the taxpayer, because they are taxpayers, out fixing our roads, where our town has to adapt to it. You know, Sanford, everybody does that. They adapt to what's going in. And when we start recommending gravel pits to overtake our roads for us, then that gives them a golden ticket at the same time. So, you
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of things you've gotta look at. You know, if you tell this guy, I'm gonna have you stripe all the way to, Hearst Corner, well, you guys don't know where that is, but Hearst, Curtis, one of you guys' pits up there in the back corner, okay? Why should that pit take the financial hit on that when everybody else is using that road? Especially when you got 6 pits on that road, you're gonna divide it all up. There's a lot of stuff that you gotta look at. But there's gotta be some consistency. That's all as a select board member, that's all I wanna see. So,
Thank you for that, thank you.
I'd like to add a little bit of context to the issue about the escrows. The $94,000 escrow you're talking about was pertaining to the solar farm over on H Road. And part of the reason for the high amount was because we don't know, and we had a lot of lengthy discussions about this, about the disposal of solar panels where there is no good way to dispose of them. So that was part of the discussion as to why the amount was so high.
you know, I've had discussions on it also, because, you know, obviously we had to figure out how we were gonna put it together and everything. And, you know, I looked at it going, okay, well, first of all, the people are putting solar panels in, they're leasing that property off the property owner. Okay, when their lease is up in 20 years, yeah, they get their 94,000 back, but they jump on the lease, the property owners are responsible for it. And every year, we put in our warrant that we vote that we do not have to take that piece of property. Now, everybody knows that piece of property, New Dana Road, okay? Somebody went in there, left a mess, didn't pay the taxes, town took it over. That's one reason why we put that warrant in every year, that article in the warrant, because we do not have to go take that over and take responsibility. It's the landowner's responsibility. But, you know, that's what you guys plan on doing. But if you're gonna do it for them, you gotta do it for everybody else. You gotta find a happy medium somewhere. That's all I like to do. Either you do it or you don't, or find a happy medium where it's fair for everybody. And when we say you have a pit where there's gonna be an alternate use, okay, you've gotta consider the ramifications of what's gonna happen later on, okay? Does the money they put down on the first part, is that fine? Or is it because of the secondary use, is there gonna be an alternate price? You gotta, that's stuff that's the only thing I can see the moratorium helping, stuff like that. But at the same time, you could also do it at the June meeting too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As long as they can get it all ready for that.
Thank you, David, very much.
Can anybody else say anything to add to that, on both sides?
I would still, come on up, David. We'll go. Hopefully.
Can I have your level?
I have my gavel. I have my gavel, so things get out of control, all right?
But he throws us.
I'm understanding a lot more about the town. I've been really doing a lot of research. We have a very young planning board compared to you old people that have way more experience. So these guys don't know as much yet. Jason's new at his job. He's just understanding it. I wish I would have known about the moratorium way before, and I still believe this way. Every pit owner will sit down with the planning board with all the documentary, the stuff we have, and this could have been worked out by the information we could have gave you guys to help you. And instead, you went the long way where it's almost like we feel like as citizens of the land, we're getting it taken away from. Because a lot of things that I'm hearing tonight aren't even actual facts. Our pits, maybe not all of them, right now the Department of Environmental Protection comes in our pits, they look at our pits from the sky. And now, that's how it's all done. We are, you know, I don't believe the Facebook things, the crazy things you read about this, about everything. We are a lot monitored more than you want. Our water quality, this thing about hurting the lake, the day my dad's pit's 40 years old on the start of there, that has never done anything to the lake. They're actually better than having houses. But the real thing, we could go back and forth, a lot of things she said. I got 500 acres, it's not gonna be a 500 acre pit, even it's only 80, but the Department of Environmental won't even let us open up 80. You only open 30, or maybe if you're lucky, 40, you can't go any farther till you reclaim it. You all have to bond it. Doesn't matter, like one of the things this young lady said, well, they leave that. That's the old days. Nowadays, when you got a pit, You put money down, they don't care if you reclaim it or not. You're gonna reclaim it, because if you don't, you're not gonna get your money back. And the Department of Environmental Protection is not gonna, forget the town rules. They're not gonna let you go any farther. They're watching you from the sky. Hey, don't go 1 more acre until you reclaim 5. And then the town comes in, like the thing about the SURES checking. And I still wish there was a way we could hold off this moratorium for a month, get every pit person in here. We could bring all of our stuff from all of our pits, have that lady come. We could solve so much of this without a moratorium. It's not the right thing. We know what we can and can't do more than you guys, and we can change more. It doesn't have to be this. We have to reclaim, or they reclaim. And the most interesting thing that I'm hearing from the town people, that they don't want is houses. I don't have to say the name. I went down to see young Curtis's pit there. I'm telling the people, walking on the street, I go, I want to help him next summer, because I know you don't want anybody in there. I'd let him come into my pit. Oh my God, that'd be good. I said, in fact, I'd like to make a deal with him. If it helps to have him stop, just go out of my pit. Oh, that'd be good. And then I said, well, if we do that, then he's going to put houses. Houses? We don't want houses. We'd rather have a gravel pit. And that's all the things, that there's a balance here. And I say to the planning board and to young Sivney, if we could all sit down with you and with her, go over all these rules, all this stuff, the moratorium's the last thing. We didn't get a chance. If you guys would sit down with us, some of the things that I'm hearing tonight that aren't factual about the water quality, we got wells in everywhere. We test them twice a year. My dad's pit from 40 years ago is still tested. There's never been a pit in Acton that's ever had a water quality in a lake or a river. And the other thing, if water's ever going in, the Department of Environmental Protection will shut you down. They don't need the town. They'll shut you down that day. So these are some of the things the planning board doesn't understand yet, that if we could just get you guys to give us a chance, everybody here, we would make the rules with you. We would make the restrictions so you could kick them out. The moratorium is always a last thing in a town. And I'll tell you, what people really don't want, from what I'm seeing, isn't the pits as much as they don't want, and I'm hearing it because of my piece of land. Oh my God, you're only gonna develop 80 acres, you're not gonna put 400 houses in there? No. We said, we want you to go in those woods and get it. So I just want people, if we could just sit down, there's just so much talk going around that I'm listening to that aren't even the facts.
Thank you, David. Anybody else on the board have any questions? Thoughts? Opinions?
I do.
Go ahead, Ray.
Okay, Ray.
We're looking at the 5 concerns. I kind of want to break the first one down here, the increased volume of large commercial vehicles. Being the planning board, you guys see what development has come across in town, what's coming in new, all the people that are moving in from other states and whatnot. What's the percentage of that would warrant you guys to make this statement of the increased volume? I mean, they're gonna do business as they do business. People are gonna continue to buy gravel, sand, or whatever other minerals are coming out. But is there a larger percentage of people that are buying and building homes that would warrant this increase in vehicles, large commercial vehicles? To me, it's the way I'm interpreting it, like, there's gonna be more trucks on the road.
There will be. I mean, I think there's a lot of flawed thinking here, frankly, and misinformation, in that this moratorium is not about doing anything to the existing pits right now, okay? So in terms of the increase, people can talk about, well, we've already got a problem on the roads, so what's that gonna do? Well, the issue is, yeah, we do have problems on the roads. Do we want to increase the problems? Because obviously, if you've given out a certain number of conditional use permits, for example, I know of one where they're allowed 50 trucks per day, okay? So let's say there's 4 of them, so there's 200 trucks a day allowed presently. Well, obviously, if you add 3 or 4 more pits and give them the same 50 truck day allowance, you have increased it by 150 to 200 trucks a day. I mean, we don't need a study to establish that. And I frankly think that there's a lot of, it's either that people genuinely don't understand, or they're perpetrating misinformation, perpetuating misinformation. This doesn't do anything to the existing pits. And obviously, if you increase the number of pits, you increase the number of all of the existing problems. I mean, I'm not directing that at you.
No, I understand that, but I guess
So you don't need a study to demonstrate what's common sense. We don't need a study to demonstrate that the H road isn't wide enough for the traffic that's on it. I mean, anyone that goes to the transfer station and then leaves and has a truck coming from the opposite direction on their side of the road, or you don't even know if it's your side or their side because it's not marked, it's obvious. We don't need a study to show us that the road isn't even paved equally. There's portions where the pavement cuts in now. The shoulders are inadequate. We know what some of the problems are, and they're only going to increase, is the point.
Okay, so are there other company or other people that are trying to open more pits?
Well, at the time that we talked about the moratorium, we were not aware of any applications. Since we talked about the moratorium, Mr. Pepin filed an application, is my understanding. We also had one pit owner who was talking about wanting to excavate deeper, to mine deeper. He withdrew that portion of his application and proceeded on something else alone. But, you know, that's an example of someone on the planning board. I don't know enough about what potential additional harms might exist by going deep, how deep is safe. I don't know that, and I don't think that you can expect lay people to know the answers to some of the questions that are being posed. There's a lot that I do want to say at one point. I'm not going to do that right now and cut into your questions, but I did want to respond to the one that you raised.
Okay. So, I guess that raised another question in my mind. You're talking about Mr. Pippin wanting to open up another pit, or is it an expansion of the one that he already owns?
I don't think it was operational. I don't know if I don't know whether he owns the land he's talking about or not. You know, whether it was a pit that had a conditional use permit.
It's a new pit.
I don't know.
It's a new pit.
Okay,
So that would-
so it's a new pit, or even if it was one that was not operational, again, if it becomes operational, you're adding more trucks.
Okay.
But we did not make that decision.
From that aspect, of what you just said, adding more trucks. I don't know if he's here to answer the question, but is he purchasing more vehicles to operate on this other one? On this other pit? Or is he gonna be using the...
Why would he be purchasing more vehicles?
Well,
He's added more truck traffic coming in.
It states the increased volume of large commercial vehicles. To me,
Somebody doesn't have to buy trucks, or you...
You add another pit, you're adding more trucks.
There again, this has become framed by a number of people in the community as particular or specific to Mr. Pepin, and it isn't.
Right, I understand.
So that question kind of goes to that. You know, this isn't about how many pits Mr. Pepin owns, how many trucks he has, what his particular application might add to the mix. It's much broader than that. And so I think part of it becoming framed as relating to Mr. Pepin has created some of the problems. The misinformation, the ill will that some people have placed. It's not about Mr. Pepin.
Right. And I understand that. And I understand what you're saying of more use if he gets another pit. I mean, the same amount of trucks for just more trips in order to, whatever the volume, and that's why I asked the question, what is the growth rate? Not necessarily of Acton, I mean, obviously he delivers materials to other areas other than Acton. So I understand that portion of it. Let's go to my second part on that, number one. With regards to pedestrian and vehicular safety, has there been any reports of accidents, any type of situations that would warrant this concern?
So I haven't had any confirmed accidents, but we have heard that people have been run off the road, not purposely, but the trucks were on their side of the road and it ended up forcing that other driver into the ditch. I haven't seen it personally, but we have been told on a couple, numerous instances that this has happened.
And have there been reports filed with the police about that?
Not with me. It doesn't come to my office. I'm just telling you what I guess you would say in my, or anybody's defense, it's hearsay because I don't know the actual facts. I wasn't there, but I've just been told, people have called the town office, complained about, multiple, entities, not just one.
But you received no police reports?
No.
If you look
really
at the
nothing to report.
deterioration, well, 1 second. If you look at the deterioration of French Street alone, I got trucks coming down by my house at 5:45 in the morning. Who's policing them? And why are they leaving so early when other planning board members made their conditional uses? Turning onto French Street from Milton Mills, you know the turn. I mean, they've already rolled one truck over in Milton. That's why Milton doesn't allow through trucking. So why are they coming through there anyways? Whose job is that to police that? We can get DOT up here. I've been pulled over by DOT. It's not a good time. None of these guys want DOT. I can tell you that right now. You know, it's just gonna be a bigger headache for them if DOT comes in. It's not fun.
And I understand that, but what I'm saying is without something that's in writing, anything that is an actual complaint, we're going off of hearsay. And I'm not saying that everything is false.
Well, God forbid
but there are
somebody
no
gets
facts.
it, God forbid it takes a tragic accident for this to actually make effect, you know?
And I understand the planning board's trying to prevent that type of situation, okay? But this is a concern that is written down here as far as vehicular safety and that, but yet you have no facts to back that up.
Why can't you want me to get the police report from Milton about the truck rolling over on the corner? I mean, it's coming from Acton.
And that's one incident, right? Out of how many times have...
It's only gonna take one incident to kill somebody too, correct? So...
I've taken evasive action on more than one.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be anything.
Every vehicle that...
Hold on a minute, Dave.
So then the question is, you talk about, you gave a specific example of trucks coming in or by your house at a certain time. Isn't there a identification on the truck of who it belongs to?
Yeah, I know who it is.
So why isn't a complaint being filed on that aspect?
Who are you gonna complain to?
Complaint for code enforcement. Code enforcement.
Right.
So he's gonna sit out front of my house at 5:45 in the morning?
Yeah, that's his job.
I get up at 4 in the morning, so
I do too.
I'm not gonna go sit by your house,
Why?
'cause I don't live close to you, but I'm saying, if you're making that type
I've got
of...
a camera at my house. I've seen the sheriff go by once in the last year on the camera. So you tell me if the sheriff's doing his job as well. So there's your law enforcement.
All I'm saying is, if you know who's doing it, then that should be addressed with that particular pit. Okay, I'm not gonna go into the deterioration of the roads. We know most of the roads are bad, in Acton. The widening of the roads, I think that's, necessary.
I'm just wondering how these questions are helping the Warrant and Finance Committee right now. Like, you guys are dealing with finances, right? And pushing these agendas.
Right,
It sounds like,
and I'm looking for facts.
it sounds like you guys have already made up your mind, so you should just get your vote through so then I can go home and enjoy my night.
Jason, if I may, I understand you.
You know, this is actually, it's not even, this is ridiculous. I mean, I honestly, I care about your opinions, I really do, but,
It all shouldn't have been on you, I will say that.
this moratorium can go either way for me. If it passes, it passes, it still can be enforced. So,
Just wait.
Sorry, guys.
Jason, now you know how we feel.
Let's not do go there.
If I may, before we move on, what prompted a lot of these questions tonight, and Jason, you addressed it in the very beginning of the meeting, but what prompted a lot of these questions tonight was work that these people on the board have worked on trying to get ready for this meeting tonight. And when you give, and I'm not saying you, when there's half a dozen reasons why we need to do this moratorium, and some of them are ordinance issues, and the other ones that's been listed, we, as a Warrant and Finance Committee, make recommendations on the warrant, and in order to do that, the committee needs to understand why we're here and how we got here. And that's what generates a lot of the questions.
Right, and the vote goes to the people. You guys just recommend what you guys want to do, right?
100%.
And so you guys have already seen by this whole discussion, I can see the way, so why are we beating this, why do we keep on doing this? You know, you guys have already made it very clear right from the very beginning on how you sway, and that's fine. You guys are allowed to do whatever you want.
No, I haven't, Jason.
Well, okay, well, I appreciate you keeping an open mind, but some of these other members, I don't see that open mind.
I mean, I came to the planning board meeting, the public hearing, and I just asked for some clarification. I didn't give an opinion one way or the other.
No, and you have been pretty,
And we listened to
you've been
the
listening.
concerns of the pond people, Moose Pond, you know, and some of the lake people. We've talked to people, and, you know, we're not here just to put this out there for shits and giggles, per se. We're out here because we're listening to people. Some people, Mr. Pepin said, some people said they didn't want to see houses. I've heard people say they wanted rather see houses. I got people that complained today about the lake, one of the lakes, saying their family's been on the lake for, I don't know, I'll just throw out a number, over 75 years, and seen the lake quality change. He's got videos. He wants me to come over and sit there and watch, I don't know, Laserdisc videos of him with the lake. I mean, we've listened to the concerns of people. That's what the planning board has to do as well, not just deal with other things. We're not here to prevent people from making money at all. That's the end goal in life. You need to make money to survive. But we have to listen to the townspeople before anybody else. That's, you know, we're going off a comprehensive plan that's over 20 years old. You know, and that's, should be taken up, but, you know, if you read that, some of it is mentioned in here about gravel pits and whatnot. So, you know, that's where I stand, I mean, to be honest.
Well, I apologize if I'm frustrating you. I'm just trying to understand this from an entire perspective here of facts, okay? Instead of just people complaints and assumptions and that type of situation. So let's move on to why all of our boards are here, and that's to serve the people of Acton. Okay, how many people from the town of Acton work in pits? Do we know that? Do we know how many employees work there? And with the moratorium, how many of these people are gonna be laid off for 150 days?
Why would they be laid off?
It's not affecting existing pits.
Based on what I told you, this does not affect the pits that are currently operating under conditional use. Why should anyone lose their job?
Well, he said it affects expansions. It affects expansion. If I can't expand into another part of my pit, it's not permitted, and I have to expand into it. And by the way, we are deemed essential during this pandemic.
So we're nurses.
So wasn't everybody else.
Well, we are. By infrastructure, and if we need to get into another part of our pit to keep operating, if there's a different change of material, then we can't go about to do our business, because now we're held up for 180 days.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand what you're asking, because
It's not what- it's what-
Hold on a minute, hold on a minute.
Because I want
If you're gonna
to,
talk, you please come up to the podium.
if what you're suggesting is that, I understand that someone has a parcel of land that's 80 acres, and they're allowed to be extracting on 10 acres. And then when they have finished that, they're supposed to do the reclamation, they move to another 10 acres. That is not expansion. It's already been approved for that. Is that what you're saying you're concerned
Come
about?
up to the end of what we're doing, reclaiming, and we need to open up and re-permit for another
Another 10.
10, another 20, whatever it is. But if it comes in within this 180 days, we can't do so.
That's not true.
No?
That's not true.
Expansion of
You have
condition-
already
expansion, not expansion of your mind, expansion of conditional uses. So if you were coming in to do a completely different thing in your mind that you weren't permitted for.
So in my
You're not, it has nothing to do with opening up more land.
So in my conditional use permit, I'm not allowed to take incoming material. So if I had a job coming up and I needed to take incoming material.
You have to go to the planning board for a conditional use permit.
So
that
now
would
I
fall
can't
under
for
it.
180 days.
That would fall under it.
So that could interfere with my day-to-day business.
When
If
was-
I wanted to bring incoming material.
Could. When was the last time you guys came in for a conditional use?
Actually, I have a job coming up for a guy that wanted me to take some incoming material that I could use for my reclamation, because I have really sandy topsoil, and I'm kind of looking like I can't do that job right now. And it would help my guys with overtime, help feed their families here in town. So it does affect us. So please stop saying it does not affect us. It affects us. It affects every single one of these gentlemen here that own a business.
I have people in Acton that were here the other night, the planning board member. By waiting 180 days, I have the Mead family, I have 3 generations in Acton. Some are retired, some still working for me. The Mead that works for me now runs our crusher. By not starting on that bed, by 180 days, he doesn't have anything to crush. My loader guy from Acton has no work. By this bit stopping, this is affecting people's livelihood in Acton. So we might as well make it clear. I get all 10 or 12 people here from Acton. It affects the guy that's gonna haul that gravel there, that's lived in Acton all his life. I have numerous families in Acton counting on my gravel that will be affected by this being shut down.
What are we shutting down that's already operational?
By going 180 days, there's 180 days that I lose before I can even start my permits problem, my permits. So what's gonna happen is I have a crusher with 3 people, and now we're gonna have to wait after 180 days to start, and I'm gonna have work. These are employees of Acton, and I'm already telling them, if this moratorium goes through, we're gonna have a big void in our time, where I may have to lay you off, you may have to find another job. Because now they're stopping me from continuing my permitting process. You can go look at my crusher, it's gonna have to stop when I'm done the ground of this year, because I'm not gonna be able to live in this pit. So it is affecting my workers.
That's a new operation, though.
But I'm saying the moratorium is gonna stop my business. And it's gonna hurt my Acton employees, because I can't continue.
Thank you, David. I agree with Jason. We've talked about this quite a bit. And if anybody else that hasn't had a chance to voice their opinion wishes to, that's fine. Like I've said many times, everybody's voice is wanted.
Yes, I think someone.
If you guys are satisfied with all the questions and answers, unless somebody objects, we can put this to a vote and put it behind us. Bernie, I do know there were some things that you wanted to,
Yeah,
because like I said, I don't want to try to squelch anybody's
thank you.
speech.
Why I see big picture, not statistics. Why I think this is important, I think the town needs to comprehensively, big picture, comprehensively and uniformly regulate the permitting of mineral extraction. Right now, that's Any regulation is accomplished by individual conditional use permits. They're not uniform with each other. They're not part of a comprehensive plan of looking at the whole town, what the town wants. I've expressed this before. I think that the proximity of the pits to one another, the pit operations using the same roads with heavy equipment and so forth, there is a cumulative effect here that might not exist in the same way if the pits were not so close to each other. I think we need to be aware of safe placement of the pits in relation to each other. We need to preserve and protect public health and safety. There's scrutiny and standards that are not presently in place, and a lot of them exist in this Hancock Ordinance, and we're over 20 years behind. They did that in 1997. We need to allow for orderly and well-informed development of land and protect natural resources. And we do that here within competing industries. We have the recreational industry, and we have mining industry. We need to be concerned about land values. The Hancock Ordinance, again, 1997, their objectives are in line with this: preserving and protecting surface and groundwater quality and quantity, preserving property values, assuring mineral exploration and extraction are compatible with permitted uses in that particular area, protecting wildlife and wildlife habitat, protecting the scenic quality of Hancock, its environment, and its residents. When the solar panel issues came up, there was all kinds of arbitrary suggestions about regulations without statistics. Again, just common sense. I mean, if I remember right, Dennis, I think you spoke about wanting the lawns mowed at particular times. How often you thought each year they should be required to mow. I mean, I think if we're going to scrutinize, and we should scrutinize ordinances and regulations in town, but I think we should be applying the same scrutiny to them all and not be over-scrutinizing a particular one. The issue of damage to the roads. Yes, property owners in Acton, the same as any other town, pay taxes. However, the use of heavy equipment on roads does significantly more damage than motor vehicles. So I'm not sure that it's really equitable to say they pay their property taxes, so they have the right to assert considerably more damage to the roads, which then damages our vehicles also. This has been in existence for over 60 years, the Generalized Fourth Power Law. And that apportions out how much weight is in the vehicle, how many axles are in the vehicle, and what the resulting damage to roads is. If you have a loaded truck that weighs, loaded 80,000 pounds, and a 4,000-pound motor vehicle with 2 axles, the truck is 20 times heavier than the car, okay? But using this formula that's widely recognized within the industry, it's 20 times heavier, but it does 160,000 times more road damage to the roads. So again, I don't think it suffices to say they pay their property taxes, so we have no right to expect more from them in terms of contributing to our road infrastructure. Now, you can talk till the cows come home about what the planning board should be doing and shouldn't be doing, but again, we're lay people, and we can't just like throw spaghetti on a wall and say, well, if they're gonna have a truck, then they should pay a $50,000 fee or whatever. It has to be rationally related to what they are doing, and we are not in a position, at least, like that to come up with the data necessary to do that. The same with coming up with drafting an ordinance. And so, again, I go back to what I was saying earlier. If we recognize these problems exist, we can just say, oh, well, they exist, no matter what we do, they exist, so therefore, let's just create more of them. Let's magnify the problem by allowing more of the same, or we can take a step back and say, what are we going to do about these problems to make it better, to regulate it? And I think that that's the intent of the planning board, is to say, let's stop the expansion of the problem so we can look at some remedies to it.
Can I please respond to that?
Thank you.
Would that be possible?
Hold on.
I would really
Yes.
like to respond to that. if possible.
Yeah, hold on just a minute.
I think that's all.
Okay.
That's all. But this is not about, you know, some of the stuff that I've personally heard and overheard. This is not about people from Massachusetts and away generating this through calls to the code enforcement officer. This is not about the planning board having knowledge about any application and taking steps to thwart it, okay? It's just not true. And it was very difficult to sit through some of the comments the other night in that respect, and to be accused of mudslinging when we didn't even know who we're supposedly slinging mud at, when in reality, the planning board's having mud thrown at it, you know? The criticisms, it's fine if they're legitimate, it's fine. But again, these are volunteers. Nobody's getting rich by sitting on the planning board. It's all volunteer. And I will also say, both at the public hearing and tonight, Mr. Sevigny is our code enforcement officer. He's not a good boy, he's not young Sevigny, he's our code enforcement officer. We don't have boys working in our offices any more than we have girls running the clerk's office.
I wasn't saying it's an insult because I know his dad, I'm sorry.
It's-
I should say it a different way.
It shouldn't have been said. Period. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay.
Let him speak.
I don't think that, Mr. Peppin meant any disrespect.
No.
And appreciate your candor on that. Come on up, guy.
What's his name?
Could you state your name, please?
Matthew Pepin. I'm a civil engineer, and I've worked around gravel pits all my life, not just for our Pepin and Sons, but for other companies as well. So I have quite a background with this. You know, we're really trying to question if a moratorium is what's needed here. We're seeing 6 to 7 different vague things that are being brought up here with little to no backing. We've seen no violations. We've seen nothing documented. So we're really trying to do our best to respond to this. But there's a whole number of things that need to be looked at, and a moratorium is not necessarily the right answer here for looking at those things. As you can tell by listening to all of us, a moratorium is a very serious thing that's really going to affect us in a lot of ways. There are other ways to go about doing this, and I wonder if the planning board has considered some of those other ways. Right now in the town of Sanford, they have decided to make some big overhauls to their ordinance, and they're looking at Augusta's state ordinance, and they're using that as a model for what they want to do to make changes. And they have not enacted a moratorium to do that. What they've done is they've sat down with the gravel pit owners in Sanford, and they're working with them to actually change the ordinance. And the planning board has the ability to do that as well. You know, I kind of hear Jason talking about how he thinks that the rules need to be even across the board for everybody. But the planning board has a lot of authority right now in the ordinance to to dictate what time these gravel pits start, what time they don't for new applications. They can say for new applications, we don't want you to start until 9. So do you really want to limit the planning board's ability to make those decisions by having a set of rules that's straight across the board, even for everybody? Or do you want to give the planning board the ability to say, hey, you know, this new location that's coming up, it's kind of close to Great East Lake. Maybe we shouldn't let them start until 8 or 9 o'clock. Maybe we should only let them have 5 trucks because it's close to a lot of residential homes. The planning board has a lot of ability to do those things right now for new applications. And we're seeing a lot of language here in this drafted moratorium that talks about increased development. You know, we've had probably, considering that our gravel pit we did not have our application in when this all started, the only other pits that have been approved probably in the last 5 years is maybe Bill Plant's pit, and then that was really it. So we're not really seeing a crazy amount of more applications coming in for this sort of thing. We're just dealing with the applications that have already gone through and how to deal with the enforcement of those applications. You know, we need to consider that past planning boards approved these gravel pits. Jason says, you know, the road, he doesn't think that the road's safe enough. There were 6 different planning boards that approved gravel pits on the H Road at one point in time, and they looked at roadway safety when they did those approvals. They decided at that point in time that those roads were wide enough for these trucks. We're not seeing increased development here. We're seeing an increase in truck traffic. A lot of that probably has to do with the fact that there's a pretty good economic boom going on right now. There's a lot of houses being built. But the moratorium language is talking about increased development. There's nothing to stand on there. There's not a lot of increased development. When you guys had the problem with the solar farms, was there a moratorium enacted when that came to town? No. So you were able to handle that problem by getting together, making changes to the ordinance that were in the best interest of the town, and that was a completely new industry. This is an industry that's been around for 75 plus years. So the town is very familiar with this industry already and has the tools at hand right now to enforce the rules and to make changes as they see applicable without putting a moratorium in place. They can do what Sanford's doing, what other towns are doing, and they can sit down and make changes without a moratorium. There was no moratorium when the solar farms came in, so why is there a moratorium now? That was a much more, you know, that was a lot to figure out, it sounds like. And you guys have a lot of experience with this.
Thank you, Matt.
I would like to share a letter. It's a quick letter that our attorney had put together. I just want to share it with all of you. It's addressed to you and it's addressed to the selectmen. And it just kind of talks a little bit about this. So this will be given to the selectmen as well.
I would encourage you, and anybody, or everybody for that matter, Wednesday, February 2nd, there's going to be a special town meeting to vote on this, and it's going to be at the Acton School at 6 p.m. And I appreciate people's opinions, and hopefully at town meeting there'll be a good discussion. But unless there's any other stuff in the committee, I would entertain a motion on a vote. Okay, I'm gonna call for a vote. I guess I don't need a motion. This controversial stuff is very enlightening when you're sitting here, right, Chris?
Yes.
All right, I will make a motion that we
It's not a good time.
take a vote on the for or against the moratorium. So it's up to you to call. All in favor? All or against?
Is there a second on that?
I'll second that.
All in favor of going to a vote?
Are we going to a vote?
We're going to a vote?
Yep.
Yes. We want it to go to a vote, don't we?
Yep. They sure do. I know Jason really does.
Oh, I don't care. That's necessary.
The motion is,
Yes, and
Shall we vote?
And we, yes, and everybody voted yes.
yeah, okay.
And we discussed earlier, Bernie, Mr. Broda, and Joe Rumer is going to abstain from voting. And Ray, you'll be voting in their stead. So, all in favor of the moratorium, please raise your right hand. Those opposed? 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your patience.
0 to 5.
05. We got it.
Thank you guys for your patience tonight. And, one more meeting, at the school, and hopefully all this will be behind us one way or the other.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Thank you.
Thank
Get
you,
some
guys.
names. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say to you,
Dennis, do we have any data for the deputy?
What's that?
Do we have any?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that.
Okay.
Joyce is just trying to get people's names. We didn't have a sign-in sheet.
All right, oh, no worries.
Right, it's just that we did this 30 years ago. People complain. People complain, the road issue. People were complaining about that new development, it's gonna ruin the road.
And that's why I was asking for proof of what they're asking.
Well, I've reclaimed one, but three gravel. But that's my field is horticulture, not gravel. Or people took out the gravel, and I had to reclaim it. I had to figure out how to do it.
I knew this was gonna go this way.
So I had to. And most of these guys, a lot of these guys just take the gravel and make a mess. A lot of these guys, well, the roadside was, that green line's 12 feet. Over there.
Sorry, I got everybody.
Okay,
I
let's
should
wait
have-
for Bernie to come back.
Yeah, I should have had this beforehand, but I didn't. He's,
But what they need to do is to sit down and talk.
Bridges, huh?
People here, and the people complain. They just sit down and talk about it.
I think Bernie went to the man.
You know what it reminds
His stuff's still here.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of any business in that we've all worked. So, management decisions.
I think it went to the math.
They don't know about information. And this guy, me.
I know his whole family. It's like his dad was on my camp. I said to Jason, don't call you Missy.
I'm not saying mister, but I don't want someone a good boy.
No, but I didn't mean any things, and it's a habit of the younger generation, I know, but I'll call them. I said, Jason, we don't call you, just whatever, but I don't call them, I get it.
I think
You're right.
Jason's fine. I don't have to be Mr. Broder. Byrne is fine, but not boy.
No, I didn't.
Not young 70.
Yeah,
It's not appropriate.
I say that to the younger generation, the young kids.
Well,
I won't
stop.
It doesn't
It's
work.
not appropriate.
But he said he didn't mind.
You know what? He did mind because I discussed it with him before. Maybe he's not going to tell you he minded,
But I told him I wouldn't.
but he minded, okay?
Yeah, never again.
Where'd you get this thing here?
Okay, guys, we have a meeting going on here. I appreciate it.
Good night.
Hey, thanks, if you like the vote.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm
Yes,
going
sir.
to tender my resignation effective immediately. I didn't want to do it in a big, but I'm clear which committee, and thank you.
Well, I regret that.
No need.
With regret.
Dennis, may I ask a question?
Sure.
You guys are gonna be asking questions about the sheriff.
I was gonna explain it to him. Jen gave me a call, and I was gonna explain to
Would you like me
him.
to come up and explain it?
No, I can do it.
You all set?
Yeah.
No, we're all set.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, David, for being here tonight.
The next thing on the agenda, Joe, the next thing on the agenda is the finances. If you remember the last selectmen's meeting, there was gonna be a shortfall for the money to pay the sheriff. And Michelle talked to, Sheriff King, and with the time frame that we lost a contract deputy, and by the time they, get the new hire, it's probably close to the end of February. And with that being, sometime in February anyway. And with that being said, with the money that was saved by not having a contract deputy, they think it's gonna balance out. So we don't need that warrant article, for some more money. So that's why it's taken off the warrant.
Weren't we talking about $8,000?
Yes, but you're also talking November, sometime in November when we lost the service.
Yeah,
to,
end of the month.
End of February.
December, January.
So you're talking 3 months.
3 months.
So that'll wash.
They said it should wash if, whenever they get the position, filled, it might be a few $100s back and forth or whatever that might not work. And if we need to, we can address that at the school town meeting.
Dennis, so what's the current status on the sheriff?
Right now, they haven't started doing interviews yet, Joe.
Okay, so they're interviewing for a
Deputy,
deputy for this town, okay.
yeah.
Now, he works 20 hours here, works 20 hours
Yeah.
in Shapley. Does he work also for the York County on patrol?
Yes.
Okay.
On, as needed, you know, I mean, obviously, it's a county
That
thing.
vehicle belongs to technically the town of Shapley and the town of Acton.
Yes.
I've seen it on patrol, the old one on patrol in different towns.
Yeah.
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
2 or 3 years ago or
So-
recently?
Is that a current thing? I mean, do they have?
I don't know, Joe. I don't know. So tonight, for us, the, contract deputy is a dead issue.
Yeah.
You know, so any questions like that, we can talk to about down the road, or go to the selectmen, whatever, but we're gonna put that behind us. The other thing is the, next on the agenda is, I gave everybody out tonight, the schedule for the school budget. This got finalized this afternoon. So there was a few adjustments, that were made from the school committee meeting last week. The school is looking to have their budget on secret ballot up here at the town hall, and not having town meeting. But if you look in here, because apparently we still have to have a public hearing. So there's gonna be a public hearing, on March 24th.
So the public hearing is gonna be a month before the election?
Yes.
And absentee ballots a month before the election?
Is what, Joyce?
Absentee ballots available a month before?
Yes, I'm not sure what the time frame is. The superintendent and, the finance director and Jennifer, had conversations back and forth today about this timeline. And this is the timeline that works for everything, for absentee ballots and whatever, and the posting and
All the moving parts.
all the moving parts, which is way above me.
It's a long time.
But I do want to say just a little bit about the school. They had I would say a major catastrophe recently, and that one of the boilers, I think when the insurance guy come in, did the inspection and said, no, can't use that boiler anymore. They are in the process, and it might even be completed today as far as installation. They are in the process of replacing one of the boilers, and they got the money from a reserve fund they had. I think the price tag on that was up around $125,000 or something like that. Those boilers, 30 some odd years old. I assume the one that failed, probably was the primary, because they have two boilers down there. They have the primary boiler, and then they have another one that comes on when, it's so cold that the one can't keep up with it. So it's had many hours. So they're in the process of changing that, and that's something I picked up from the meeting. The other thing is, just before we get into it with the school, they believe, in the last few years especially, there's been about a 1% variable in the school budget. Right now, they're in the process of negotiating with the teachers, so they don't have any exact numbers as of right now for us. But we will have the exact numbers.
When does the contract expire?
I would assume it probably June 30th.
Okay.
They've been working on these negotiations for a while.
Okay.
So they've been running about a 1% variance, and hopefully it'll stay about what they've been doing. But one thing that's very interesting with the school budget is, Tuck, I can tell you, and this number isn't exactly accurate, but about 85% of the school budget is all contracted services. Whether it's bus contract, tuition contract, special ed services, I mean, the support staff contracts, the teacher contracts. There's very little of the school budget that there's really a heck of a lot of control without losing services. And that's, I'm just bringing that out to the committee so that when we start the process, you guys will have some idea, but we have so many new members this year. And I did send Kim today, I forgot, the new names of everybody that's on the board, so that, you'll get the emails from the school.
We got that tonight, I think.
Yeah, we got
You got it
everybody.
tonight?
Yeah.
And, so Kim did do that.
Yeah.
And Kim Oliver, and you guys will find that Stuff will tell you, she's a great person to work with. So I think basically that's in a nutshell an overview of where we're headed. So on February 10th, was when they'll start reviewing the budget. And then on March 10th, they'll continue. And on February 15th is when the school...
March.
I'm sorry. March 15th is when the school committee will finish reviewing the articles. And on March 17th, and this is where the timeline comes in, what we did last year was the school committee votes on the warrant articles and approves them. And what we did last year, which I thought worked out very good, didn't you, Tucker? Absolutely. It saves another night of a meeting, is when the school committee gets done with their vote, then we switch places at the table and open our meeting up, and we do our vote. I believe having the school budget secret ballot, that it's gonna drop that down to, I think half a dozen warrant articles, rather than the 15 or 20, how many there usually is, to be more of a consolidated articles. Any questions about any of this? Anybody feel free to call me, send me an email, and I'll try to put forward any questions you have to the school.
Can we see this budget before it's ready to go to the selectmen? I mean...
Yes, you do.
Before the 17th?
Before... We'll start getting stuff on February 10th.
Really?
Yeah. What they've done in the past, and I was talking to Kim Oliver today, and I believe it's gonna be the same way, is, you can help me out here, Todd, because we go to the school committee meeting for a budget, start the budget process, and normally what they do, they'll take the busing contract, the tuition, and maintenance, and they'll give you that information that one night. And then at the next meeting, whatever departments they're gonna cover, they'll give you that information that night. And answer any questions you have or whatever while they're going through it. And the school is very thorough in their explanations on how they come up with these numbers and stuff.
What was the percentage on contracted services? 85%?
It's about that, right? It might be a little more, a little less, but it's in the 80s. I mean, that tuition's over $1 million, busing contract. I don't know, I don't have it in front of me, but, there's very little leeway in the budget. I mean, if you want to take out, the sports, you can get rid of that,
No, I would,
the after-school, programs, learning, robotics or Explorer or whatever. So, I mean, there isn't a lot they have a contract with Sanford for, the new nutrition program that's run out of Sanford. Fact is, I think there's 3 contracts with Sanford right now that I can't think of it off the top of my head, but they're looking at. Might be the special ed contract and the tuition contract and the nutrition contract.
Now, when you say tuition, that includes elementary, junior high, or middle school, whatever they call it, here, and the high school?
Tuition normally would be under the high school.
High school.
And what we pay is whatever, the state only allows a school to charge so much, a certain amount of money. So, and I'm not sure what the dollar amount is right off the top of my head, but say Sanford is allowed to charge $12,000 a kid, that's what we get charged. And I think that we pay that quarterly, but I'm not sure. I think it's a quarterly thing. It used to be anyway.
Because the numbers can change.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah, they do, they change.
You know,
You might have 5 kids move in, or you might have 5 kids leave.
Yeah,
So it's all, I think it's based quarterly.
yeah.
And they used to do an exact amount, and then that didn't work out too good. And so they decided they were gonna add 2 students to the estimate, and it was 17 that year that moved in. And so now I'm not sure exactly what formula they use, but it's a hit and miss thing. And then this was a school committee under state law, because they run under the school law. Now the school committee has the authority, unless they've changed it again, to move monies around from one department to the other, or whatever, wherever they need the funds. And it used to be you couldn't do that. Then the state said you needed a 2/3 vote to be able to do that. And then the state come in and said, no, the school department, because a lot of them are under these SADs, and in many towns, and all the rules are set up for these districts, so that the school committee has all the authority to move monies and stuff around, and not the municipalities. And it's very interesting being a department of the town under municipal law, but they also operate as a school district under the state school laws. Very interesting situation. It is a little complicated, but...
Very different.
And it is different. They are a department of the town. And they do write their own checks. Our treasurer doesn't do the checks for the school. But with that being said, the Board of Selectmen have to approve the expenditures of the school because they're a department of the town. So it's really, there's a lot there, and the school does a great job with explanations, and hopefully people can make these meetings, and they're a great group to work with. They really are. So, are we going to
What time is it?
wait and just have our meetings? We didn't get to the audit tonight,
I know.
which I
What
apologize.
time
but it's
is,
getting
what
late.
time is it?
It's 10 of 8.
10 of 8.
Yeah.
We can do some of that if you want, or if you don't, it's up to you guys.
Did you get a copy of the audit?
Yes, I did.
Okay, great.
Clear as mud.
Do we still have our meeting scheduled for Monday?
No.
No?
I haven't canceled it either.
Oh,
You haven't canceled it.
No.
We could do that with the audit.
we could do the audit on Monday. I see his head shaking.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Is that what you guys want to do? I'll touch
I
bases.
think that we should be fresh to look at it.
Yeah.
No.
I have a question about, don't laugh at me or throw anything at me. about going into executive session. Can that be added to an agenda?
2 hours?
Yeah? Find out about it, check and see.
I'll have the conversation with Ray,
Okay,
because Ray has sat there and gone through this, and I know Ray's mind. He knows every sentence and every exclamation point that's in this.
Only it fits in Spanish.
And that will tell us whether we can and we can't.
okay. All right, I would just like everybody to hang out for a minute, okay?
So with that, if I could have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hang on.
So, thank you, Virginia.
Thanks, Virginia.
I